Welcome back to Red Hawk Media. Today we're taking another look at Final Cut Pro, and we're talking about a few more of the details here that we'll be working with, things that'll make life a little bit easier as you're editing. To begin with here, I've got a project that I'm working on for the Evan Riley Band, and we've got some clips that are in here, and we've got music that's down here, a full track and everything. One of the things that I wanted to show you first is when you've got smaller clips that are like this, and it's kind of hard to see what's going on and they're difficult to edit, you can do one of two things here. To get kind of the grand scope and scale of everything, with your slider that's down at the bottom here, you can grab the anchor points on the end of it, and you can either drag them out like this so you can see the whole project, so there's the full length of the song that I'll be working with, or what you can do is shrink them up, and then it gets very, very detailed. And sometimes that's really handy to use actually when you are making really small edits, and you got to be really picky about what you're taking. So like right now would be one of those times where I might want to consider shrinking this down a little bit more. So one of the things that I would recommend here is I would recommend layering clips in here. Um, you're going to have multiple camera angles. So I've got my bottom layer here, which is kind of the main camera angle. And then I've got another clip here that's coming in from a different camera angle. And then I'm going back to another clip with a different angle. And then I've got a side angle that's over here. And you get the idea. Now, to kind of time these out and get them all into perspective, you're going to want to get to layering the actual clips here. So, to make the cuts a little bit easier here, I've layered these clips. I wanted the audio to start at the very beginning, but I'm going to get rid of some of the video. So I'm going to just scrub back to the end of the clip that I want to keep. And now I'm going to grab the razor blade tool, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Okay, so now I've made an exact trim where I want it to be, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that clip. Now it's all lined up. Now I could leave it as is, or I could drag it down into the same line. It really doesn't matter at this point. I kind of like to leave it in different lines of video here so that you can visually see the different angles and different clips that are going on here. Then I've got another clip that comes in as he's talking here. Goes back to the crowd as they jump when he makes a reaction to something, okay, or says something. So I'm going to have that quick clip show up in there. And what I'm going to want to do is lock right onto the end of that. Now these two arrows that are popping up here and here, that's just showing that it's snapping right to the last frame of that particular clip, which means that I'm not leaving a frame or cutting off too many frames or anything like that. It's a great way to make sure that I'm actually editing all this properly and cleanly. Okay. Now, one other thing I'd show you, I mentioned it before, but it's very useful, is the snapping tool here. When you're making editing like this where you need to get to the end of clips, it's useful to have on. So I get my razor blade tool, or I can push B, and it switches right over to the razor blade tool. And I go ahead and I make my clip here. I'm going to go ahead and push A to go back to the selection tool, and I'm going to cut out the part that I don't want anymore. Okay. So now we've got this sequence that goes from one clip into the other clip, the preacher pounding the pulpit kind of thing, fire and brimstone. Okay, them jumping back to the preacher, and then we've got a side angle of them actually looking bored as ever. Okay, and then the music comes in here. So, this is a little example of how you can layer different camera angles and piece those in there. Don't forget that as you have multiple camera angles, up in the upper left-hand side here, you can see that I've put them into bins. That's a great practice to organize all the stuff. One of the things I would do as I'm working on scenes as well is I'd create scene bins to drop them in, or just do each scene as its own sequence before I put them all together. Let's take a look at one more thing here, and that would be the resizing of video. Okay, this crowd is not as big as I would like it to look here, so I'm going to actually want to resize this clip so that it's filling everything up here. I want close-ups on faces and just to make it look like a mass of people. So to go ahead and do that, to work with any clip that you want to edit, you double click on it. Once it's double clicked on, it's going to show up in my canvas over here, and it's going to allow me to do a number of things to it. The first of which, I want to resize it. Now, if you're not seeing this X on here, which shows the current size from frame to frame, you can go in here and you've got a number of different things. You can go with just the image, you can go with the wireframe as well, or just purely the wireframe, which shows you the size of everything, and it keeps the picture out of the equation. I like having the image plus wireframe because then I can see the sizes. Now, if you've got this up, your view percentage, and it's way too large, it's not fitting into all the windows, it's really hard to tell where the edges of the video are. And you can't tell if it's like hanging over the end of the canvas or if it's sized perfectly here. So I'm going to go back down to 25%, and I might actually go a little bit smaller than that because what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this video here. And Final Cut is kind of nice because if I grab the corner, it automatically proportionally changes it. At least in this Final Cut Pro it does. In the newer one, it does not proportionally change it. You have to hold Shift. But I am now repositioning my clip here so that it shows up exactly the way I want. Okay, it's focusing in a little bit more on the people. And I want to make sure I don't leave any black at the top there because that will be just empty space, not filled with video. It'll look pretty goofy. So I go ahead and make that change, and I'm all lined up there. Okay. Now, one thing I'd like to do here is eventually I'm going to want to create a zoom effect here. And tomorrow I'm going to show you how to create a Ken Burns type effect using keyframes with motion. There's this motion tab up there. But that's the next episode. We'll be taking a look at that. In the meantime, thank you for joining us with Red Hawk Media. We'll see you again.